Your 30s are kind of a turning point when it comes to money. In your 20s, you can get away with a lot of mistakes. But now, things feel a bit more real. You're earning more, sure, but your responsibilities are growing too. And what most people don't realize is this: the decisions you make in your 30s can shape your financial life for years. Because now you've got both time and income, and how you use that really matters. Instead of chasing random financial goals, it helps to think in milestones, like clear checkpoints along the way. Because without that, money just kind of flows in and out, and you don't really see progress. But when you have milestones, things feel more structured. You know what you're working toward, and that keeps you from just drifting through your best earning years. And that foundation usually starts with an emergency fund. It's not exciting, I know, but it's one of those things that quietly protects everything else. Because without it, even a small problem can throw you off track. But when you have that buffer, you don't panic. You stay in control. But as you start reducing that pressure, you'll notice something. Your cash flow opens up. You're not constantly sending money toward old decisions anymore. And that creates space. Space to actually start building something instead of just keeping up. Now this is where investing comes in. And not just randomly, but consistently. Like something that happens every month. Because your 30s are a really powerful time for this. You still have time on your side. And now you actually have income to work with. At first, investing might feel slow. Like nothing is really happening. But that's normal. Because compounding takes time. It builds quietly in the beginning and then starts to show later. The key is just sticking with it. Now this is where investing comes in. And not just randomly, but consistently. Like something that happens every month. Because your 30s are a really powerful time for this. You still have time on your side. And now you actually have income to work with. At first, investing might feel slow. Like nothing is really happening. But that's normal. Because compounding takes time. It builds quietly in the beginning and then starts to show later. The key is just sticking with it. Another important milestone is increasing your income, but not passively. You actually want to work on it. Build skills, look for better opportunities, find ways to grow. Because when your income increases the right way, everything else becomes easier. But here's where people slip up. As income goes up, so does lifestyle, and that cancels everything out. So it's not just about earning more. It's about managing it better as it grows. That's what really moves things forward. Now, once your basics are in place, another milestone starts to matter. Actually tracking your money. Not obsessively, but just knowing where it's going. Because a lot of people earn well in their 30s, but still feel stuck. And most of the time, it's not an income problem. It's just that they don't have visibility. Once you can clearly see your money, your decisions improve naturally. You don't need strict rules or complicated systems. Awareness does most of the work, because when you notice where money is going, you start making small adjustments. And those small changes add up over time. Another important milestone is building real savings. Not just a small emergency amount, but something meaningful, something that gives you breathing room. Because savings aren't just about safety. They give you options. And having options changes how you make decisions. Now, alongside savings, you want to start building assets. Things that grow over time. Because income alone doesn't build wealth. Assets do. And your 30s are one of the best times to start focusing on this. This could be investing. It could be building something on the side. Anything that creates long-term value. The idea is simple. Your money shouldn't just sit there, and it shouldn't just disappear. It should be working in the background. Another milestone that people overlook is controlling lifestyle growth. Because as income increases, it's easy to upgrade everything. And while that feels good, it can slow your progress without you noticing. The goal isn't to restrict yourself. It's to be intentional, to let your lifestyle improve, but not at the cost of your future. Because the gap between what you earn and what you keep is what builds wealth. Now at this stage, planning becomes more important. Not complicated planning, just direction. Knowing where your money is going long term, because without direction, even good habits can feel scattered. And once you have that direction, everything starts connecting. You're saving, you're investing, you're spending. They all begin to work together. Instead of feeling random, your system starts making sense. And that's really the shift in your 30s. You move from just managing money to actually building something with it. You're not just reacting anymore. You're directing it. And that's when real progress begins. Now, as things start coming together, another milestone shows up. Consistency. Not doing things perfectly, just doing the right things regularly. Because at this stage, it's not about big moves. It's about repeating simple actions over time. Saving regularly, investing regularly, making small adjustments when needed. That's what actually builds progress. And when you stay consistent, you start noticing something interesting. Your system begins to run without constant effort. You're not thinking about every decision anymore. Things become automatic. And that's when money management starts feeling easier. Not because it changed, but because your habits improved. Now, another milestone in your 30s is separating needs from wants. Not in a strict way, but in a clear way. Because when everything feels like a need, money disappears quickly. But when you understand the difference, your decisions become sharper. And this doesn't mean you stop enjoying your money. It just means you become more aware. You spend on things that actually matter to you, not just out of habit or impulse. And that small shift makes a big difference over time. Another key milestone is building multiple income streams. Not all at once, but gradually, because relying on just one source of income can limit your flexibility, and adding even a small second stream changes your financial stability. Now, this doesn't mean you need something complicated. It could be something simple, as long as it's consistent, because the goal isn't to overwhelm yourself. It's to slowly build additional support for your income. Another milestone that becomes important is protecting what you've built, because as your finances grow, so does your responsibility to maintain them. This includes things like basic protection, planning ahead, and making sure one problem doesn't undo your progress. At the same time, you start thinking more long-term, not just months ahead, but years, because your decisions now have a longer impact window, and that changes how you approach money. And when you combine all of this, consistency, awareness, direction, your system becomes stronger. You're not relying on motivation anymore. You're relying on structure. And structure is what keeps things moving, even when life gets busy. At this point, your financial life starts feeling different, less reactive, more controlled. You're not just earning and spending anymore. You're actually shaping where your money goes. And that's where things really start building. Now, as your financial system becomes more stable, something important starts to shift. You stop reacting to money, and you start making decisions more intentionally. Earlier, most financial choices feel automatic. Bills come in, expenses happen, and you respond. There isn't much space to think. But in your 30s, once you build even a bit of stability, you begin to notice that space opening up, and that space matters. Because now, instead of asking, can I afford this right now? You start asking better questions, like, is this actually worth it? Does this help me move forward? And that shift from reacting to choosing quietly changes everything over time. And once you start thinking like that, you'll notice something. You don't suddenly make perfect decisions. You just make fewer bad ones. And that alone makes a big difference. Because most financial problems don't come from one big mistake. They come from small, repeated ones. So when you slow down just a little, you start filtering those out. You pause, you think, and then you act. And that small pause becomes one of your biggest advantages. Another thing that changes in your 30s is your level of financial stress. It doesn't disappear completely, but it becomes more manageable. Because your system is stronger now, you're not relying on one single outcome. You got some structure in place, and that reduces the pressure. You don't feel like everything will fall apart over one mistake, and that stability changes how you think and act. And when that stress goes down, your thinking becomes clearer. You stop rushing decisions. You stop reacting emotionally. Instead, you take your time. You think things through, and that leads to better outcomes. Because most bad financial decisions aren't about lack of knowledge. They come from acting too quickly under pressure. Now at this stage, you also start seeing money differently. It's not just about numbers anymore. It's about what money gives you. More flexibility, more control over your time, more options in how you live your life. And that shift changes your priorities. Because now, you're not just thinking about earning more. You're thinking about living better. Another important milestone is understanding trade-offs. Every financial decision has one. Spending now means saving less. Saving more means less comfort today. And neither is automatically right or wrong. But what matters is that you're aware of it. Because once you see the trade-off clearly, you start making more intentional choices. At the same time, your goals start becoming more personal. Less about what others are doing, and more about what actually matters to you. Because by your 30s, you realize that everyone's path is different. And once that clicks, you stop chasing things that don't align with you. And that clarity removes a lot of noise. You stop following trends blindly. You stop comparing constantly. And you focus more on your own system. Because when your direction is clear, distractions don't pull you as much. And that helps you stay consistent. Now, as everything starts aligning, you begin to feel momentum. Not something sudden, but something steady. You see progress. You feel your system working. And that builds confidence. Because now you're not guessing anymore. You actually understand what's happening. And at this point, your financial life feels more structured than ever. Not complicated, just clear. You know where your money goes. You know what you're building. And that clarity makes everything easier moving forward. Because now you're not just managing money, you're directing it with purpose. Now, as you move deeper into your 30s, there's a shift that most people don't really notice at first. It's not about how much money you make anymore. It's about how your entire financial system behaves. Because earlier in life, people tend to focus on income as the main solution. More money feels like the answer to everything. But over time, you start realizing something important. Income alone doesn't fix bad structure. If your habits, decisions, and spending patterns stay the same, then even higher income just amplifies those same patterns. So instead of solving problems, it scales them. And that's why this stage becomes more about awareness than numbers. You start paying attention to how money moves through your life, where it goes, how quickly it leaves, and whether it's actually building anything meaningful. Because the real milestone here is understanding that your system is more important than your income. Once that clicks, your focus shifts completely. You stop chasing random financial wins and start building something stable that can actually hold long-term growth. Another major milestone in your 30s is learning to think in layers instead of isolated decisions. Because early on, most financial choices feel separate. You think about spending in one moment, saving in another, investing in another. But in reality, everything is connected. Every financial decision has a ripple effect. What you spend today affects what you can save tomorrow. What you save affects what you can invest. And what you invest affects your future freedom. Once you start seeing those connections clearly, your thinking changes. You stop making decisions based only on the present moment, and you start considering how one choice affects multiple outcomes down the line. This is where financial maturity really starts showing. Because instead of thinking, can I afford this right now? You start asking deeper questions like, what does this decision cost me in the long run? And that shift alone can completely change your financial direction over time. Now, another important milestone in your 30s is understanding the power of consistency over intensity. Because early on, a lot of people focus on big financial moves, big investments, big savings goals, big changes. But over time, you realize something much more important. It's not the big actions that build wealth. It's the repeated small ones. Saving a little every month, investing regularly, Staying consistent even when things feel slow. At first, these actions don't feel like much. They don't create excitement. They don't feel like progress. But over months and years, they start stacking. And that's when the real change happens. Because consistency compounds. And compounding is something you don't really feel at the beginning, but it becomes very visible later. So instead of chasing intensity, this stage is about building rhythm, a system you can repeat without burnout, because that's what actually lasts. Another major milestone in your 30s is emotional control when it comes to money, because early financial decisions are often emotional. You spend based on how you feel. You save when you feel motivated. You invest when things look exciting. But emotions change quickly, and if your financial decisions follow emotions, your results will always be inconsistent. So, in your 30s, you start building separation between emotion and strategy. You don't ignore emotions, but you don't let them control decisions either. Instead, you rely on systems, rules that stay consistent regardless of mood or situation. And that's where stability starts to form. Because even when life gets unpredictable, your system stays steady. And that steady foundation is what keeps your progress intact over time. And finally, one of the most important milestones in your 30s is simplification. Because over time, something becomes very clear. Financial success doesn't require complexity. It doesn't require dozens of strategies. And it doesn't require constantly changing your approach. Instead, what actually works is surprisingly simple. Spend less than you earn. Save consistently. Invest regularly. Avoid unnecessary financial chaos. And stay focused on long-term growth. That's it. But simplicity is harder than it sounds. Because people tend to overcomplicate money. They think more tools, more strategies, and more information will speed things up. But in reality, simplicity is what makes things sustainable. When your system is simple, it's easier to maintain. And when it's easier to maintain, it lasts longer. And in the long run, that consistency is what actually builds financial stability. So by the time you reach this stage, you're no longer chasing complicated answers. You're focused on doing simple things, repeated well. And that's what changes everything over time.